Hello.
Hi, Marvin.
I am going to come right back as SIG-MC. Hold on. Okay. Hopefully you can all hear me. Welcome to SIG Multicluster meeting on Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. I am your host again, Laura. Stephen is on PTO and Jeremy may drop by halfway through, but he is at a workshop today. So I'm in charge. Let's get started with the agenda. Somehow I'm not logged into this for some reason, but that's okay. I actually have the first point, though I am going to defer like the full decision of this until Stephen is back from PTO, but just heads up, there's a Slack thread on Slack about having an APAC meeting either in lieu of one of these meetings or in addition to one of these meetings. There's some conversation about how to do that and when to do that. I did talk to Jeremy about it yesterday. There is interest in having at least one of the leads present there if we can handle it. So that's another reason why I kind of want to wait till Stephen comes back so we can see if that fits in his schedule. I do want to surface that there's at least some interest in the Slack thread of having the APAC meeting be in addition, so that we keep these meetings weekly right now, since that was a recent change. So just I hear that, and that's if anybody else has some other thoughts about the APAC meeting or how to like hand off between the two, or just about like the cadence of things, please feel free to add on that Slack thread. And then I'm going to bring this up again next time when Stephen is here. So unless there's any comments on that, I will cede the time from that to the next group. Ryan and Arthur, you are on the agenda for MCS V1 Alpha 2 PR.
Yeah.
That's many
Okay,
people, I guess, but yeah.
Go ahead, Arthur.
I mean, we were discussing that on Slack, but I don't know what do we want to specifically discuss here. Probably like the
I mean that
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
not sure if we had any conclusion. So this meeting, I thought
Yeah.
we could discuss a little bit so
Yeah.
that we can move ahead.
Let me pull up this thread and the doc really quick so that we can be semi-organized. Please hold. NIRM. Okay, so that's wow, so many threads, people.
Yeah, the problem is that the thread is like
Yeah.
60 answer-ish.
Yeah,
Right.
we may have had like 4 or 5 threads explode out
Yeah.
of the meeting yesterday.
It was exciting. It was exciting, but yeah, now we need to like kind of bring it back in, you know. Doodly-doo. Wow, why can't I find this thread right
I think in general we were agreeing for like mirroring the field and trying to avoid the webbook situation. I don't see any like people disagreeing to that. So I think it would be a fair assumption, but then we need to decide basically moving into the route, possibly only moving the status in the IP in the IPs in the status, sorry. Something like that. I guess most folks wanted the root in the, well, moving everything in the root potentially.
So I also have, maybe I wasn't clear about this earlier, but I have no opposition to a webhook if that's something that would be desirable and useful for some implementations. I had just assumed it would not be necessary previously, but if that is a desirable path, I'm certainly open to it. Because yeah, the other path is like duplicate fields for a V1 Alpha 2 release, and then eventually clean up the old ones and remove them in like a V1 Alpha 3 or V1 Beta 1 directly.
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest,
that's what I would vote for. I would please, if we could go the phased approach with this, whatever we do, because it's going to help us that, us that already have environments out there using this for several years now. It would really help us.
Yeah, if that's your preferred approach, yeah, I'm open.
That's my preferred approach. I hope we can come to a consensus on that pretty quick, and then we can decide what we're going to change in it. And I agree with your approach, Mike, just moving it all to root. I think that makes a lot of sense. To me, that would be my opinion on no status, no spec, just make it all root.
It wasn't my original idea, and I had to kind of like revisit the conversation from 6 months ago. So like, thank you, Laura, so much for pulling all that together. There's so much context, but that's kind of like where the meeting had arrived at that time.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So it sounds like most of the conversation is revolving less about the content of the change, but the like tactical logistics of how to transition. Okay. And it sounds like there's at least definitely some sort of phased approach. It sounds like, and the exact specifics, maybe if we can either use this doc or another doc that like lays out like by, this, and this, and then we can all like, look at it or put our, like heart emojis on it or something. I know in the past, Mike, you had like kind of identified which stakeholders, like which implementations were stakeholders, and you had like little checkboxes and stuff on GitHub. So I think something like that we can at least like get, feel that we've like kind of covered our ground on this like logistical thing. And yeah, kind of having gone through like the past a little bit, I do think that was where this was kind of at when we like left it off, but then there was like a long break. So it makes sense that we're basically picking up at this time again. So good job, everybody. And more broadly to everybody in this call, it was a little, sorry for scrambling at the beginning of this, but for for the context of this conversation, there's this really long thread over here, which has been linked. And then there's this doc that's linked in there. I'll put it in the agenda too right now, which kind of has like the TLDR of what's going on and some references, so that if you want to keep track of what we're even talking about, that's what's going on. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, feelings about MCS v1 Alpha 2 PR?
And just like a quick comment,
Yeah.
like I'm not even sure if we actually need a v1 alpha 2. Like if we mirror the field, we can just add the field in alpha 1, and in beta 1 we get rid of them.
Interesting. I hadn't considered that, but you might be right. I guess the question of like, technically, is that useful or is that confusing to implementations that are already using v1 alpha 1?
Well, technically, additions are easier. Removals is the kind of thing you'd want to in a bigger change, like going to beta.
Yeah, that's why we would do the removal as a second step, whether that's a v1 alpha 2 or 3 or the v1 beta 1.
But what I'm trying to say is a removal is a big step. It's the bigger kind of step. So it's better
Yes.
to do removal when you move from alpha to beta.
I think Mike, you and I, or whoever, let's double check the API like conventions doc to see if there's anything specific about that, just to make sure we're kind of like in line with that. But yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that since it's already a quote unquote big change for implementers to go from an alpha to a beta, then like sticking that in there at least makes like semantic sense, I guess, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of like, do you do like a v1 alpha, like keep v1 alpha 1 still, but do like a 0.2 release or something like that?
Right.
I think that's what Arthur's suggesting.
Yeah, v1 alpha
might be
2
fine.
could be a thing. Sure.
Okay, got
All right.
options.
Yep.
All right, so we'll throw some proposal and then people can be like, hate mail, I hate the plan, do the other thing that you didn't write down.
Just to confirm, so that we are going to use this public doc to move forward. Basically, I'm just trying to get this
Yes.
continue to move.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I'll try to help pull any missing context from stuff like my original issue. But thank you, Laura, so much for putting this together, and also like thank you implementers for like raising concerns. Because we like this only works if if implementers are on board and it works for them too. So thank you everyone for being engaged in the discussion.
Okay. All right, Arthur, you want to talk about dual stack MCS API?
Yeah. I guess you can. Yeah, you can just click on it.
You can share if you want, if that's.
I think the PI is super small, so.
Okay.
So basically, it's. I think I already discussed that a few weeks ago, but it was just like scrambling around the like initial thoughts. But yeah, basically disappear those two main things. First, it acknowledged that there is an IP families field in like regular service, and implementation may use that to somehow decide if they want like something dual stack or whatever IP family they use in the service import. And second thing, I would like to add a IP family field on the service import, which would be essentially optional and a bit like similar to services. Like it would dictate how the IP should be like allocated, but the implementation may choose to do whatever they want. Like for instance, if the implementation uses a gateway local to the cluster or something only in IPv4, they can just stick the IPv4 in or not even fill that field. But for us, it's useful because I would like to like reconcile that globally in Cilium. So I think it would make sense, at least for us, to have this field on the service imports. I don't know if you have thought on that, on the general ID.
Okay. I don't have an immediate thought, but I think I need to think about it a little bit. But I understand where you're coming from.
Okay, well,
Yeah. All right.
should-
Yeah, let's talk about this on this PR, and then if we still haven't talked about it by next week, then let's bring it up again.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and same for everybody else. If so, this is part of the conversation a couple weeks ago that was related to what sort of strict or non-strict like rules or guidelines we could make about if a service should use the IPv6 or IPv4 endpoint. And so this PR is related to that conversation and has this extra thing about surfacing this IP families field to the service export that's passed from the service so that implementations can use that information. Corentin, you have a hand.
Question on this. Is it related to the like DRA looking way of providing networking that was talked in the chat and shown at KubeCon recently? Arthur, you pointed me to that, and I'm curious, is like picking the service export should pick also maybe in conjunction with this network declaration?
It isn't related, but it could be somewhat similar because for instance, in Cilium, like we are in a full flat network, right? So if you are an IPv4 client, you can only contact IPv4 backends, essentially. So if you have two multi-network that are isolated, it's kind of the same situation that was like referring to essentially. But conceptually, it's not the same-ish situation, but I mean, it's as if you had like one full network IPv4 and one full network IPv6. So yeah, you have this weird thing, but not entirely related.
So and so this is the goal is to define what the interface the service should use ultimately.
So for context, like the service import field, as of like somewhat recently, like 6 months ago, we are not even able to have two IPs on the IP field. So it was not capable of fixing that. And yeah, I just fixed it up in this pair, but the CRD is actually 2 since 6 months
Yeah.
or so.
Right.
Okay, so maybe I just don't have the context on that. I'm sorry. It just sounded related. I want to make sure if you're going in that direction, that won't be incompatible with the thing you showed me. If that's the direction networking is moving towards, I don't know.
But basically, the dual stack situation was not a thing when MCS API was created. So this tries to bridge that gap, and as of my implementation concern, to fix it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Arthur, for taking a look at this. Yeah, as he just mentioned, like this was something that was in the cap as like, we'll figure it out when SIG Network figures it out. And so here we are having to actually do that. So thank you, Arthur, for picking that up. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns about dual stack MCS API? Please take a look at the cap and add any thoughts that you might have about the IP families and the wording in the cap as well. All right, Corentin, you can share if you want, or I can do it.
Can you do it since you already have the
Yes,
screen? Sorry.
I am totally in control.
Por favor. All right, so let me talk a little bit. We don't have to necessarily go over the doc in here. Anyone interested can read it and comment in there. The idea is we would like to be able potentially to have the efforts in the SIG report status and encourage them to move without having to wait for the full SIG in some way, encouraging some discussion offline, still keeping the decision making in the SIG. So ideally, if we have a blocker or reach a point where we want the whole thing involved, we would bring maybe a query mechanism and all that. So it's a way to define a little bit of work streams. I call them pillars, but that for the SIG. So if you scroll a little bit, so this is the box that I shared in Slack last week. I think that got some traction a little bit, like people were interested. And those are the different things we can tackle separately. Cluster inventory, for example, we've been doing for a while. There's still things we want to do there. So that could be one thing where we keep on pushing and we keep reporting a status of what's going in this area to kind of like keep it moving forward. Load balancing and networking, pod networking. I think you guys, Arthur, Mike, Stefan, you've been doing like that with MCS and Cilium and all that. So I think there's definitely more and on track. And what you just presented, like in those 2 points, though, that would be the status and things you are bringing to the SIG, and that's the status you would give ideally for that. I think there's like ergonomics, UI, UX, interface, proxy, whatever we end up with is kind of a pillar we should open and spend a little bit more time in and define it and move on the SIG. And obviously the middle part around scheduler, syncer, multi-cluster package. How do we improve on the work API? What do we do on scheduling and those multi-cluster package controllers or multi-cluster controllers that we want, leveraging scheduler and syncer and kind of like being in the middle of that. How do we align that and continuing in this in this area? And so I'm trying to suggest those are the things we want to work on. For the SIG, I have the goal. I was like rewriting the goal a little bit, but ultimately, I think Laura pointed that our goal fits pretty well. So I think it's just we want to put some more emphasis on like, hey, all this fits already in the goal of the SIG. So let's continue on that. So I'll just modify that paragraph a little bit. There are some action items at the bottom. I don't want to revolutionize how the SIG works, to be honest. I want to make sure we're aligned on those goals and we agree that those are things we want to work on. I'm sure the pillars can come and go, so I think that'll be interesting. Putting the pillars on the website, I think would be interesting. It's like, hey, you want to contribute to a SIG? Here's the areas that could be interesting to you. So the reorg, the SIG meeting, I think the thing I'm suggesting is like we could talk about the pillars, kind of a status update at the beginning. So, that way, it's like, here's what happened, here's what we're still missing, here's the decision we should make or discuss here or something like that, and spend a little bit of time in the meetings to cover a little bit all of them to make sure there's air for every single aspect. Because I think that's one thing we've been doing is sometimes we focus, let's say, on cluster profile, and there's very little time for MCS and or things like that. And we've got more meetings now. It's awesome, but we need to make sure there's air for everything and there's air for newcomers and demos and presentations from other people. So if we could, for those streams where we kind of know, bring the minimum like set we need to align in the SIG, everyone together and try to see if we can push a lot of the discussion offline if we can. One of my goals here would be to get more offline discussion. And I'm the first guilty here. I'm sorry, I contribute much more in the meeting than I contribute offline, and that's something I want to change for me and Google in general, maybe in our contribution to SIG. So that's that. And then this short-term goals I'm trying to propose, and I'm sure we'll have to talk about them in more details. And then there's a little extension to kick off some demos and newcomers intro and try to facilitate that for the SIG. So have a look, comment in the doc. I'll bring it back next week and see if folks are in agreement. We can update the website and try to move our SIG meeting in, I guess, 2 weeks with that in order. Sorry, I talked way too much. Anyone wants to comment?
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I mean, like, yeah, so this is sort of like Quarantine sharing, like a written down version of some things that we've, talked about. So please take a look at it. and see if it jives with you. This is also kind of like an extension of the conversation we were having on Slack around like this pillars, thing. So like this is all like kind of in an open space now of like, does this align with like what people kind of want to go forward about or not, so we're in the soak period for that. So please soak in it. Thanks.
At a first glance, this makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it would be helpful because we definitely have had, as you kind of mentioned, like ebbs and flows of different projects and different focuses throughout the SIG, and this seems like it will be helpful for driving more consistency and approachability for folks that are interested in contributing. Kind of like as we've especially noticed kind of a recent uptick in attendance. So yeah, I'm excited about this, and I'll take a look. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe one more thing is if there's anybody on this call who like has been a lurker or is new or otherwise hasn't been able to figure out like how to intersect, I'm very interested if you feel like any of this will make that easier for you, because all of us who already love bloviating about whatever our thing is in this call, like we could keep doing that, but if it would be better, also including for you, that it function more like this or in some other different way, this is a great opportunity to make that known. So I particularly welcome those comments right now.
I want to make the call out. I see someone in the chat, or not in the chat, in the meeting notes, who's going to present next week. Sorry, I'm going to butcher your name, Raffaele, but looking forward to see that, and I'm hoping we can
make more room for that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Make more room for that.
Cool. Okay, moving right along to Quarantine again, wearing a different hat. What's up with credentials?
This is a doc about cluster profile credentials. We all agree we want to do that. It's very light. It really takes the slide, and it's more like, hey, we need to talk on that. Oh, I didn't make the edit access for everyone. I'm sorry. Let me do that. Cluster profile credentials is something we want to move a lot faster. Okay, I'm going to everyone edit. Okay, it's everyone editor. So let's keep going in that. There's the original slides, I think, on some of that. And I'd like to see if we can move on some of the code. We want to do a small PR and examples, and I think we can iterate with code at the beginning and then roll back to the cap once we kind of know and have a pattern we like. So that's something we're going to push for on our end, but definitely looking for contributors here because we want to make sure it fits everyone ultimately. So this is plugin for getting kubeconfig for cluster profile. So
cool.
Yeah.
Bringing it back. I guess besides like discussing on this doc, and it sounds like you're going to experiment with some POCs, and maybe we should expect to like hear about those in the Slack or see them in the SIG in coming weeks. Is that the kind of like future right now?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Cool,
yes.
cool,
And
cool.
so, and I expect this to be one of the stream or one of the pillars. So
sure.
We'll push more, and if it's notes, it'll likely go to that doc. I expect the slides to stay static at that point, but they'll be pointing to code likely. And I'm joined by Owen, I guess, on this side.
Wow. Exciting. Okay. Wow. Hey.
We're in the room together. It's like, but I can't put that. We're gonna. Owen's going to work on this also.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I know credentials was a big point for a long time, and then we kind of took a break, and now we're back. So cool. Put on your next hat, Quarantine, because
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for it.
No, I love it.
See, that's what I want to avoid, having the streams like someone taking all the time. The hub cluster PR, I don't know if Jeremy or Stefan's here, but
they are not. So
yeah. So
but
I need to reach out to them, I think, offline to see what we're going to do. There was also, was that Rainbow Mango that commented that Hub cluster was previously called host cluster in KubeFed, and the definition was very short. Right. And at the same time, it's referring to the KubeFed API. So I don't know exactly if we really need to align. If you cared about the name and some of the, if you cared about that PR, have a look on that comment and please tell me what you think, because right now I'm thinking it should be different enough. And so the renaming is okay, but at the same time, if people feel that KubeFed was authoritative, I guess, in that name, maybe legacy is what we should keep, and that we should weigh that in. So I wanted to, like, that's something the community can think about.
Yeah. So put this a little bit in context. Again, there's this position statement that Corentin was working on to try and make a definition of a hub cluster. It kind of didn't get a lot of views or traction for a while, though this concept, I mean, it's motivated in here, but this concept is certainly something that like has been talked about in different like contexts and with certain assumptions in the past and informally. Since then, there's been some more chatter on this, connecting it to prior work related to KubeFed. And Mike, you should probably hop in at this point.
Right, exactly. I mean, I don't think we really need Jeremy or Stefan to make a decision here. I think it's more like we need to gather the community's agreement on the naming. So when we did the polling, or when we asked for suggestion, no one even mentioned it, hosted cluster, right? Like that's the history. So, and if it's really the authoritative name that the maintainer from Kamada said it is, then someone would have mentioned it, right? So if but he does have a point. He does have a point that we shouldn't abandon some of the legacy concepts. But I mean, that's how technology evolves, right? Like we're not using floppy disks anymore, so we can. So I mean, like that is not a good enough argument to not move on with something that the whole community decide to rally around. So I feel like, yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm just saying I think it's okay that we can keep the PR and just keep discussing it, and there's more support, and I will rally the community around participating more in the PRs to give a bit more feedback on this as well, Pointy. So yeah, so I think that's what we need. We need more community feedback on this, and let's just keep the PR for now and then see how that goes.
John, I think you were next. You're on mute though.
Yeah. So it was mostly around the naming, as far as I understand it, and also like giving the location a context and a concept. One of the things I've always missed in most of the retired documentation and the external projects is what do you call it when your hub isn't a hub, but there are multiple hubs? Let's say you have a multi-master hub situation. Do you have just duplicates of your hub, or do you have a hub of hubs? I mean, how's that going to work? I mean, it's not necessarily something that we're deploying right now, but for Istio, for example, we were going to go multi-master just because we don't want one master being down, meaning all configuration changes stop flowing. That is, of course, a difficult thing to do, especially if we look at the multi-cluster, essentially distribution of information that's in one direction from one central point towards all downstream leaves, essentially. And I don't know if there's any idea or status around having multiple masters coordinating amongst each other. But yeah, that is essentially, if there's a name, if the name cannot be pluralized, then if at some point you get this need for pluralization, then that might be tricky.
It can definitely be pluralized. I think there's somewhere in the definition where I'm like, there can be multiple, and that can be for exactly those two reasons you're talking about. One is the HA aspect. and reliability, where you would want multiple to be failure tolerant. The other aspects is they could be multiple hubs because of the span of features they offer. Some, you could imagine a hub cluster that deals with security controllers and deals with overall guaranteeing and overseeing security across the fleet. That could be something. And another one is more on application delivery and more accessible from developers that want to deploy application. So you could imagine that multiple hubs based on those different axes. And that's something the definition allows. They would still be called hub, and it would be hub clusters, and it's up for the user to do. It's really drawing the opposition of hub cluster and workload cluster. So that's mostly what I was trying to do with this definition, and I think that fits what you're talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's essentially a definition, a cluster that is sending out versus a cluster that is receiving. That is essentially the most, the most
Infrastructure versus
distinguishing feature.
business logic in some way.
Yeah, because I was also thinking about if you go multi-master, you need some sort of coordination. You can't use leases because those are cluster bound. So maybe you need some sort of Paxos or Raft or something like that.
That still needs to be resolved as a
You get an entire mess with that as well. Yeah.
Cross-region leader election and all that. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah. So I think that like multi-hub is no worse than multi-master or multi-primary or other similar terms that have had widespread adoption. And yeah, like I think that raising the point of what KubeFed did is good to have it in to add to the prior art and other context, but it was defined within the scope of that project. It wasn't, even though it was like a project of the SIG, it was defined within the scope of that project. So I don't think that we're strictly bound to it in the way of if it was a concept defined at the SIG level, the way that namespace sameness is or something like that.
What I'm hearing from the mics, I guess, is is that we should add it to the prior art, and we can move on likely, unless and try to see if Rainbow Mango is okay with that. Also, I don't want to force him, but make sure he's okay, and explicitly mention that this was a prior definition to kind of reattach to it, even if we're moving with that new name. And at some point, Mike, and you mentioned on the approval for Stefan and Jeremy. Literally, I cannot merge the PR without their approvals. That's also why I need them. Like the little well, if I don't get them to be okay with it, it'll stay as a PR forever. And I don't really want to push it to the website if it's just a PR.
So action items is community feedback to make it clear that there's support for this, and then nudge them, hopefully by the next meeting.
Yeah, I do think that we need people's hearts or LGTMs or thumbs ups or something, since this is, otherwise it's about it being socialized enough. But I think that would go a far way, even though your, LGTM isn't going to actually merge it, but it's going to be a lot of signal. Or on the other side, if you're no, I hate this, or I hate parts of it, or whatever. I think even just having more discussion specifically on this PR, whether that's because we transcribe some of this conversation that we just had over there, and or that people go and comment individually, I think that will help a lot. So yeah, I think this one kind of got hidden for a while. And I do, when you read it, you'll see this too, but I do want to bring up that this is also very specific about how it's talking about this is one version of a control plane for a a cluster set. It doesn't have to be a Kubernetes cluster, but if it is a Kubernetes cluster, then it is called by this name and it operates under these principles that we kind of share and understand. So I also just want to call that out, that that's kind of the edges of the scope of this too. And to keep that context in mind when you're taking a look at it, and if it meets whatever your criteria are for how prescriptive or not prescriptive it's being. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns about Hub Cluster PR? Okay. We do have a little bit more time. Is there anything somebody was dying to talk about at SIG Multicluster April 29th, 2025? Going once. Going twice. Okay, cool. We will meet here again next week, and looking forward to seeing you all. Have a good 20 more minutes of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.